She thought it was just another day watering her garden, waving at the neighbors, living the life she had worked hard to build. But when the HOA Karen showed up, demanding an outrageous $250,000 fee, things turned dark quickly. In moments, the situation spiraled. Police were called, voices were raised, and the truth about who she really was would shake everyone to their core. This wasn't just about money. It was about power, prejudice, and respect. What happened next? You won't believe the moment that left the entire neighborhood in silent thought. It was supposed to be a peaceful morning in the suburbs. A quiet neighborhood, with manicured lawns, trimmed hedges, and the kind of silence that told you everyone worked hard to keep things perfect. For months, Angela and her husband had lived here, proud of what they had built. Angela was no ordinary woman. She had endured more in her life than most could imagine, and every flower she planted in her garden was a symbol of the peace she had earned. Neighbors often smiled politely, but behind those smiles, she could feel the subtle stares, the kind that lingered too long. She knew she didn't fully belong in their eyes. Still, she ignored it. She focused on her home, her work, and her family, refusing to let whispers define her. But perfection in neighborhoods like this often came with rules, and those rules weren't always fair. When the HOA Karen appeared at her doorstep one afternoon, clipboard in hand and condescension dripping from her voice, Angela sensed something was coming. Something bigger than garden flowers or lawn measurements. What she didn't know was that a single demand, a number so outrageous it could crush anyone, was about to test not only her patience, but also reveal a truth about power and prejudice that no one in the neighborhood would ever forget. Angela had faced plenty of obstacles in her life, but nothing prepared her for the audacity of what came next. Karen, with her oversized sunglasses and self-appointed authority, showed up one morning waving papers like she held the law itself. Her voice was sharp, her tone dripping with superiority. "This community has rules," Karen declared, pointing to Angela's garden as though it were some crime scene. "And if you don't comply, you'll face the consequences. That'll be a $250,000 violation fee." At first, Angela thought it was a mistake, a joke even. No one could possibly demand such an outrageous amount for flowers planted a few inches outside the line of regulation. But the smirk on Karen's face told her everything. This wasn't about the garden. It was about control. It was about reminding Angela, a Black woman in a neighborhood that didn't truly welcome her, exactly where she stood. Angela refused to back down. Calm but firm, she told Karen she wouldn't be paying a cent. And that's when the smirk disappeared. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Fine," she hissed. "Let's see what the police think about this." Minutes later, the wail of sirens pierced the quiet streets. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains, eager for the spectacle. To them, it was entertainment. To Angela, it was a test of dignity. The flashing lights reflected off her windows, and her heart raced, not out of fear for what she had done, but for what she knew might come next. The officers stepped out of their car, their boots heavy against the pavement. Karen rushed toward them, playing the role of victim with practiced ease. "She's refusing to comply," Karen said dramatically, pointing at Angela as though she were some dangerous criminal. Angela stood tall, though her chest tightened. Every headline she had ever read about women who looked like her flashed through her mind. Every story of unfair arrests, of people silenced before they had the chance to speak, echoed inside her. Would she be next? The lead officer looked at Angela, then back at Karen. His jaw tightened, his hand hovering near his belt. For a moment, the air grew heavy with possibility. One wrong move, one misunderstood word, and everything could shatter. But then something shifted. The officer's eyes flicked back to Angela, not with suspicion, but with recognition. His stance changed. His voice dropped. "Ma'am," he said, his tone suddenly formal. And then, with precision that silenced the entire crowd, he snapped to attention. Karen's smile faltered. The neighborhood gasped that Angela hadn't revealed her truth yet, but it was clear. Something about her presence carried weight, something Karen never expected. And just as the tension peaked, just as Karen realized she was no longer in control, the officer spoke words that would change everything. Asterisk. The officer's boots clicked against the pavement as he closed the distance. Karen's voice grew louder, more frantic, feeding the scene with false authority. "Arrest her. She's defiant, dangerous." Her words dripped with venom, and the neighbors nodded along, whispering their judgments. Angela stood still, her hands steady at her sides. But inside a storm raged. Every headline she had read, every name etched into history for standing in the wrong place at the wrong time, it all pressed down on her shoulders in that single breath. The officer stopped just a few feet away. His hand brushed the edge of his holster. The crowd hushed, waiting. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, Angela wondered if this was how her story would end, not with dignity, but with fear written by someone else's prejudice. And then it happened. The officer's spine straightened, his eyes sharpened with recognition. With a precision that shattered the silence, he raised his hand in salute. "Yes, General," he said, his voice carrying through the stunned neighborhood. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's face drained of color, her mouth opening but no sound escaping. In that instant, the power dynamic shifted. The woman she had tried to humiliate now stood as someone untouchable, someone who had earned respect far beyond this cul-de-sac's shallow rules. But even as the crowd reacted, Angela's gaze stayed. Locked on Karen, this wasn't about titles. It wasn't about ranks. It was about something deeper, every unspoken bias, every whispered slight, every attempt to put her back in her place. And in that silent standoff with the world watching, Karen realized the truth. She wasn't in control anymore. Officer's salute hung in the air like a thunderclap. The neighborhood, once buzzing with whispers and judgment, now stood in stunned silence. Karen's confidence evaporated, her clipboard trembling in her hands. She had tried to reduce Angela to a stereotype, to a rule breaker, to someone undeserving of respect. But in that moment, the mask slipped. Everyone saw the truth, not just about Angela, but about Karen, and about the ugliness that had fueled her actions all along. The officers didn't arrest Angela. They didn't find her. They stood by her side, their presence now a shield rather than a threat. Karen, humiliated, retreated into her house, the door slamming shut like a final admission of defeat. Angela remained still, her garden swaying gently in the breeze. To the neighbors, she was no longer invisible. But Angela knew. The battle wasn't truly over. Respect born from rank was fleeting. The deeper fight, the one against prejudice buried in polite smiles and HOA rules, was far from one dot as she walked back inside her home. Her husband squeezed her hand. She had stood her ground, not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. For every life measured by the color of skin before the content of character. And that is what makes this story more than just a neighborhood dispute. It's a reminder that racism doesn't always shout, it often whispers, hides behind rules, or dresses itself in concern for the community. But when challenged, when exposed, its power begins to crumble. So the question remains, how many more gardens, how many more doorsteps, how many more lives must be tested before we decide enough is enough? Because change doesn't start in courts or councils, it starts with us, refusing to stay silent. If this story moved you, share it. Comment your thoughts, and let's keep this conversation alive. Because the more we speak out, the harder it becomes for injustice to stay hidden.